Hey, it's Jeffrey Lin here in Shanghai. I'm in my 8th day of 3 weeks of quarantine after landing in China. So China still has one of the strictest COVID-19 quarantine requirements, and even the entry requirements are very difficult to get in the country. So I know a lot of people have questions. So I want to share my journey traveling from LA to Shanghai. It took about a week, and then it started this 3 weeks of quarantine. Hey, it's Jeffrey Lin. Welcome back to my channel where I share my journey with multiple chronic illnesses, including severe asthma, allergies to literally everything on the planet, and severe eczema. So here I am in Shanghai, China, having undertaken the toughest and definitely the most complex travel that I've ever done, especially on my own. With the COVID-19 pandemic, traveling to China has basically been near impossible for most people. It's basically impossible to get a visa, but even once you do, the flights are very difficult to get. They get canceled a lot. And also, once you get here, you have to quarantine for 3 weeks, and it's a very strict quarantine. So what is the first phase? Well, in January 2022, the government added more restrictions before you get on the flight. So you have to stay in your departure city for 1 week of health monitoring. On February 16th, I flew to Seattle, which is my departure city, because you have to take a direct flight to China, and at the time there were no direct flights from LA to Shanghai, which is where I want to be. So what is a 7-day health monitoring? Well, 7 days before your departure date, you have to get a PCR test at a laboratory approved by the Chinese consulate that oversees your flight. Okie doke, here at Arc Point Labs, just finished my first PCR test. For flights that depart from San Francisco or Seattle, this is under the purview of the San Francisco Chinese consulate. And then you wait a couple days, and then 2 days before the flight, you have to get another PCR test. And depending on if you got one of the American vaccines, or even if you got the one-shot CanSino Chinese vaccine, you have to get antibody blood tests, which tests for the IgM antibody and the N protein antibody. And throughout the 7 days of health monitoring in your departure city, you also have to check your temperature every day. You have to write it down. Once you have your temperature readings and your 2 PCR tests and the antibody blood test, if you need that, you submit all of that the day before you get on the plane, before your departure date. Again, because you have to have your temperature check readings for all 7 days before your flight, you can't submit all this paperwork to the consulate until the day before the flight. For me, I didn't get my PCR test results and blood test results, antibody test results, until about 3 p.m. the day before my flight. So immediately I submitted all of these documents to the Chinese consulate, including flight information and what kind of vaccines I got. Once you submit all the required paperwork, this is for you to get a green QR code that allows you to board the plane. An hour and a half later, I got rejection email saying I needed to update just the places that I've been for the past couple of weeks, and just to declare where I've been. And about another hour and a half after that, I got my green QR code saying I'm able to board the flight. Phase 2 is the day of departure. My flight is the 11 p.m. flight from Seattle to Shanghai, and there's a quick technical stop in Seoul, Korea, but this is still considered a direct flight from Seattle to Shanghai, because the stop in Korea is just a crew change and I guess refueling, so the passengers never get off the flight. and there are no passengers that get to come on the plane, so it's not a transfer flight. So I got to Seattle International Airport pretty early, about 3.5 hours before departure. So at the check-in counter, all you have to do is show them the green QR code, and at the same time they ask you to fill out a customs declaration form on a mini app in WeChat. This will give you a yellow customs declaration QR code. The green QR code is called the health declaration code. That is only needed for you to board the flight. This yellow customs declaration code, you need it for 24 hours. You need it to get on the flight, and you also need it once you land here in China. That you need it at the airport for various things. So you don't want to do the yellow customs declaration QR code until you get to the check-in counter. At the gate, about half an hour before departure, they start lining people up to check your temperature. This is when you have to show your green and yellow QR codes. Once you get your temperature, they slap a little sticker on the back of your passport saying you passed the temperature checks. Then they do standard boarding. You just show your boarding pass and your passport, and you get on a flight. Because our flight, I think there are still a lot of seats left open for social distancing. The boarding process was actually very fast, and we took off on time at departure time, 11 p.m. Once I got on the flight, finally was able to relax. Until you get on the flight, you don't actually know if you can get all the QR codes,
Boarded,
if you can get the visa, if you can get the flight. There's a lot of uncertainty. So just relax. I slept very, very well. Slept for about 8 or 9 hours of the 11 hours to Seoul. You stop in Seoul for about 90 minutes for the crew change and for refueling. And then you take off for Shanghai. It's another about 2.5 hour flight. We landed on time in Shanghai at 6:10 a.m. And because it was so early, we were able to dock at the gate immediately. But we did have to wait about half an hour on the plane because they said the customs officers weren't at their desk yet. So about 6:40-ish, we got off the plane. Usually at any international airport, there are long hallways you gotta walk down to get to the customs officer anyway. So along that way, this is where they have you do the PCR and temperature checks. So you go first to a station where you sign a release form saying you agreed to do the PCR test and temperature checks. Then you go through a scanner with these cameras on the ceiling that scans your temperature. And then you go to another station where you pick up your PCR test items. You get a vial and also the PCR testing sticks that they're gonna swab your nose and throat with. You go downstairs to a testing station. I think there's probably 20 or 30 testing stations where you give the nurse your PCR testing equipment and they swab your nose and they swab your throat. Felt kind of gross for the throat one. I felt like I was gonna puke, but once you get through that, you go back upstairs and then you walk very quickly to the customs officer. At the customs immigration line, that's where it took the longest for me. Especially for foreigners like myself, you have to fill out another paper form that says, explains why you're here, who your contacts are, and where you're going to stay and when you intend to leave. Pretty standard stuff. The customs officer took a long time checking every person. So I think each person probably took 10, maybe 15 minutes. It's not difficult questions, but they're just very thorough. For example, like myself, I'm here on a business visa, so they're asking, what I'm doing here, what my job is. They want to see the invitation letter from the company that invited me. They want to know where I'm staying and any contact information of friends or relatives or employers. So once they have all that information for you, I think everybody that I saw was let through. And once you pass the immigration area, you walk right into the baggage claim area. So once you pick up your bags, you head out into the lobby foyer. Usually this is where friends and family will pick you up. But instead they've transformed the lobby into different stations where you get assigned your quarantine hotels. But you don't get to pick your quarantine hotel. That's a key thing to remember. You just head to your area and they assign you a quarantine hotel. They break people into groups of about 20. That's about how many people are assigned to each bus that takes you to each quarantine hotel. For me, this was the thing I was worried most about because I have severe allergies, asthma, and eczema. I have the Dupixent medication that needed to be kept cool with a fridge. I needed a hotel that at least had a fridge and hopefully also had food delivery so that I can get food that I can eat. So luckily, I was able to talk to one of the many healthcare workers that are there that are directing you and assigning you to your quarantine hotels. There was a very nice young man, and he contacted the different hotels and different groups and see which ones had at least the refrigerator requirement that I needed for my Dupixent medication. So he took me over to another quarantine hotel group that was coming to this hotel because this hotel, he had found out, had the refrigerator that I needed for Dupixent. So once you're with your quarantine hotel group, you just kind of wait until a bus is available to take you. So at this time, we're leaving the airport about 9:30. Before you get on the bus, it's sort of like a tour group. So they take all your passports and they'll give it back to you once you get to the quarantine hotel. So we got to the quarantine hotel about 10 in the morning, so it was a half an hour drive. We're pretty far outside the city, probably 45 minutes from downtown Shanghai, but it doesn't really matter. You're going to stay in this hotel for 14 days, and then you're going to be transferred to another health monitoring quarantine hotel for another 7 days. So you can't go out. It doesn't really matter where you are. Once you get to the quarantine hotel, you get off the bus, you grab your own luggage, you get into the lobby, you set the luggage aside while they spray it with disinfectants to clean the luggage. While you're waiting for the luggage to be cleaned, you have to fill out another app with similar information like as your customs declaration. You're just kind of saying, putting in your passport information, what flight you were on, where you came from, and where you intend to go in China after you're done with quarantine. They assign you some room numbers, and they give you some information packets. They take you up to your room. That's it. Once I close this door, can't go out for 14 days. I'll do another video showing you my room tour and what life is like in quarantine. But for now, suffice to say, got really lucky that I got put into this hotel. Feel like this is a very well managed hotel, and you're not expecting the quarantine hotels to be run by a hotel staff. It's run by the medical team that's managing the outbreaks. And so they're taking very good care of us at this hotel. And so really grateful for all the workers that are doing this, because they have to be quarantined at this hotel as well while they're working here. And they're in these full hazmat type biosuits. You can only see their eyes through their goggles. So it gets very sweaty. I've seen them sweating even in this pretty cold weather. So I can't imagine what it's like for them during the summer when it gets really hot. That's it for the travel from LA to quarantine hotel. Hope that was helpful. If you like it, hit the subscribe button and leave any comments below if you have questions about coming here, or if you have already made it through quarantine and what your experience is like. We'd love to hear from you.